The Lowe Post is brought to you by Goodyear, helping you discover the road ahead. Goodyear, more driven.
And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast, and in true NBA fashion, what was supposed to be a simple podcast previewing three different teams, three elite teams, three maybe contenders in this coming NBA season is going to morph, at least in part, into a James Harden podcast. And to help us preview team number one / potential Harden trade destination, I guess maybe, wearing an absolutely gorgeous Pittsburgh Pirates baseball cap, the one and only Kirk Goldsberry. How are you?
What is up? I am great, Zach. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Loving life. Sipping some coffee. It's my night to cook dinner, which means just disaster awaits in the Lowe house. It's going to go so poorly. Things are going to get burned. It's just going to go badly. Let's talk about the Miami Heat. I want to lead off with the Heat because you know what? They made the finals last year. The point of this podcast is let's spotlight the Eastern Conference semifinalists other than the Bucks. We've all spent a lot of time talking about the Bucks and Giannis ad nauseum. Let's bring up these teams, all of whom have high expectations for this year, starting with the Heat, who made the finals. The only team in the playoffs to take 2 games from the Los Angeles Lakers, despite 2 of their 3 best players missing time in the series and getting injured in game 1 in Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo. They had a fairly active offseason, I guess, losing Jay Crowder. In comes Mo Harkless. In comes Avery Bradley. Back comes Myers Leonard. But we have to start with reports out there today that good old James Harden has put the Heat on his potential, maybe, kind of, sort of, trade destination list. This is something that Tim MacMahon and I spitballed about briefly on Monday. I mentioned the Heat as a sleeper, theoretical, speculative, no reporting, theoretical, speculative candidate to trade for James Harden. Not sure they have the goods, but Mr. Goldsberry, whatever goods they have would be Tyler Hero, and every pick they have, which right now, according to Bobby Marks, provided they change the protections on one pick they owe, is 2 first-round picks, which is like, okay. Whatever seconds they got, throw in a Duncan Robinson, throw in some salary filler. I guess there are just 2 operative questions, and I will let you pick either one you like the best. Is that enough for the Rockets? And do you throw everything but Jimmy and Bam at Houston if you're Miami to get James Harden?
You got to be very aggressive with players like James Harden, in my experience. They don't come around very often. Miami is in a decent position, as you outlined, Zach, to make a decent offer. Will it be the best offer? I don't know. That's not the decision they have to make either. They have to make a decision about how far are they willing to go down their roster, down into their rotation to make an offer for a MVP, for a multiple-time scoring champion, for arguably the best offensive player on planet Earth right now. These guys aren't on the trading block very often, and this guy is still, performing at an extremely high level. When it comes to Miami, one thing that I think I'd like to call out is that this organization has done a phenomenal job, Zach, of at least being in this conversation right now. The trade pieces that you're talking about here are pieces that they not only found in the draft or found in the G League, or in some cases found and developed people like Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, that have come and become the best versions of their basketball selves in the Miami program, now put them in a position to at least have this conversation. And I don't think that's been brought up enough. Miami has no business being in this conversation if it weren't for this incredible story of development that they've had over the last few years. But here they are. And the question, as you point out, is do you add Jimmy Butler? Do you add Tyler Hero? Who's the centerpiece that you're willing to part with if you're the Miami Heat to attract Houston? Are you willing to give up the whole youth movement that you've just built to get James Harden? These are fundamental questions that only can be answered in that front office.
I don't think Butler will ever get on the table. If there's any talks at all, again, you got to be crystal clear. If they ever actually talk, I don't think Butler will be on the table. Year 1, hashtag Heat culture, tailor-made for it, takes him to the finals, absolutely balls out in the finals. I think he's off the table. Bam is obviously off the table, just signed a giant max extension. And so it's everything else. It's everything else. And let me just play let's just play the devil's advocate for a second. Why you wouldn't do it if you're Miami? Let's just like what's the thought process? The thought process is Tyler Hero is 20 years old. When I was 20, I was drinking Powerade by the bottle and playing hearts and spades with my college buddies in a freaking dorm lounge watching the NBA playoffs. Disgusting. Just a disgusting 20-year-old kid wearing badly fitting t-shirts, awful clothes, just all bad. Tyler Hero at age 20 averaged 16 points per game in the playoffs, 43% shooting, 38% per deep. Likely going to be promoted. I'm betting on him being promoted into the starting five for the defending Eastern Conference champions this year. James Harden is 31. A lot of miles on the old tires. A lot of miles that extended past midnight, past 2 a.m. into the wee hours. Okay? If you trade the full boat, including Tyler Hero, you now have Jimmy Butler, who's 31, James Harden, who's 31, Bam is 23. That's the only young piece you probably have left. Maybe Precious Achiuwa, who they just drafted, they can hang on to him. KZ Okpala, some of these guys who haven't been relevant yet, right? So every team tries to balance the present and the future, right? The Heat in the present just got to the finals, not far away. Their future is Bam and Hero looks incredibly bright. Do you dip all the way into that for an X% upgrade in the present, knowing that you're going to have to pay James Harden in 2 years, and knowing that James Harden has seemed to have an aversion to operating without his precious, perfect ecosystem of shooting all around him? And Jimmy Butler, until the playoffs, decided he was not going to shoot threes really ever, and has not ever shot them particularly well. And Bam is so far a non-shooter. I think Bam will become a good mid-range shooter if he's not already, and maybe a three-point shooter. But does that work? That's the devil's advocate argument. Do you buy any of that? Is any of that persuasive to you?
Yeah, I buy it because I was in the last time I was on your podcast, seems like an eternity ago. It was July, I think. It was pre-bubble. And we were like, imagine we were both circling the Miami Heat. Okay. And I'll take a victory lap on this with you because I had loved what they had started to build. And this was us saying, imagine if they get the Bucks in the second round. That's the Bucks' nightmare. And it was, and it came exactly to fruition. And everything they built came together beautifully in the bubble. And some people, Zach, reportedly are calling that a fluke in other front offices. My two eyes did not see a fluke in Orlando.
Agree with you. I was the one who wrote that. Fluke is like, it's not like they're saying it's a complete fluke. It's more just like, this is a team whose militaristic culture is just tailor-made for that environment, whereas others suffered for it. But I agree with you. I didn't see anything basketball-wise in there that was not sustainable. That was like, they didn't even shoot it particularly well overall for the playoffs. They shot okay. There was nothing in there that said, other than a Dragic hot streak and a Crowder hot streak, which, ups and downs happen. Like nothing seemed like this is just wildly out of character. If anything, Bam is going to get better and Hero's going to get better, and that should offset whatever they lose with Crowder going out the door, whatever age takes away from Dragic. Like I agree with you. Like I don't buy the fluke thing at all.
Yeah, and to take it one step further, if there's a big question about James Harden, it's about the playoff performances. It's about lifestyle. Is that compatible in Miami, Florida? And James Harden has never been to the finals, and Miami just went to the finals. So it's a complicated calculus, and I'm leaning towards your devil's advocate side of the argument because that's the kind of culture we've witnessed. It's patience, it's belief in what we're building, and it's devotion to this group and this approach. And look, you can say it was a fluke. Again, I want to go back to that because I can't believe anybody who's watched basketball looked at that Milwaukee series or whatever series they would have looked at and said, this is fluky. Maybe it was a bubble environment thing. I saw a great team, and I looked at the statistical markers. To your point, there was nothing that stands out that they were doing incredibly well. It was just great basketball players rising to the occasion, making the big plays when they needed to be made. And it looked like a good, cohesive group of competitors. And one more thing, arguably one of the best coached teams in the bubble. And yeah, do you want to bring James Harden in and risk all that? No, I don't think. I think there's at least a very legit devil's advocate case that you're making, Zach. Don't do it.
I don't think it's illegitimate. And the fluke argument is tied up all in this, right? Like if the Heat feel like maybe we played 10% above our heads and our competition in the East played 10% below their heads, that pushes you, I think, to be more aggressive in acquiring a player of James Harden's caliber. If you think we just about got as far as we could, which is pretty damn far, with Jimmy Butler as our best offensive player, we need to upgrade our best offensive player to James Harden and keep Jimmy Butler and keep Bam. Then you do it. If you think, no, that's exactly how good we are, and we're going to get better this year, then maybe it mitigates against it. I will say this, though. I didn't have a lot of time today, but I did survey 10 or 12 front office people. Do you throw Hero and everything at Houston? Unanimous. Of course you do. Unanimous. Like, Tyler Hero's good. You know, I don't know what his ceiling is. I'm not going to put a ceiling on a kid that just did that in the playoffs at age 20. Is his ceiling like perennial all-star? Is it 2 or 3 or 4-time all-star? If it's the latter, and I think that's reasonable. Like, there are a lot of really good players who don't make 2 all-star teams, let alone 3 or 4. I think it leans towards you absolutely do it. And look, Harden, Jimmy, Bam, I think the shooting thing is real, right? And I said this before, like the shooting constraints on James's game there would be a little bit real. But I've also said this before. Wherever James goes, it's not going to be the Houston Hardens anymore. It's going to be, you have to play normal basketball again. Particularly the Heat didn't let LeBron dictate everything they did. They are not going to let James Harden dictate everything they did, everything they would do. And again, this is all purely speculative, theoretical. But I think Jimmy, Harden, and Bam, holy smokes, the potential, the two-way potential of that, 2 elite defenders to protect Harden and 2 guys who should benefit offensively from playing next to Harden. And you fill out the supporting cast, with whatever is left over and whoever comes for the minimum. That is pretty freaking potent. And the one argument I'll put on top of that is, obviously everyone is speculating that Giannis would consider the Heat if Giannis does not sign this Supermax, right? And the Heat have positioned themselves as a destination for the next big star, the next big free agent. They don't have to trade anyone. They can just sign free agent X into their cap space, blah, blah, blah. Well, as Kevin Pelton and others have noted, the Bam extension really complicates that. And to sign a free agent into their cap space, they might have to trade all these same dudes anyway to open up the space, including Hero. So I think in the end, most of the again, this is all brand new. I haven't thought it all the way through. I have the same concerns about Harden as everyone else, the age concerns and all that. I just think in the end, probably you do it. And I will say one more thing and I'll let you talk. I saw some reports today. Tyler Hero's off the table. Heat won't discuss Tyler Hero. He won't even be. No, just no. The Heat, if this ever becomes a thing, the Heat at the very least are having a hands-on deck meeting to discuss it. Because as you said, players like James Harden do not ever become available or do not frequently become available. And when have the Heat ever been like, we're out on a star player? Like, when does that ever happen?
Yeah. Not in my lifetime. And they've had a series of incredible, huge all-star acquisitions in my lifetime and your lifetime. The one player that I think I would love to see play basketball next to James Harden is Duncan Robinson in that group, because as I pointed out to you earlier today, I think Duncan Robinson just had the best catch and shoot 3-point shooting season of all time. And yes,
all time, you just said, Kirk Goldsberry.
I have some numbers for you, Zach. You can disagree, but the best field goal percentage on catch and shoot threes with a minimum of 500 attempts is Duncan Robinson, number 1 at 46.2. The next 4 people on the list are all named Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, different seasons. And they have never reached that efficiency level with that volume. You can disagree and say it's a little bit of an exaggeration. I'm not going to fight with you about that. I'm here to say, oh my God, this could be the best shooter that James Harden's ever had next to him, floating around, coming off curls. And the thing is, Duncan can get to a shot in so many different ways, has that lightning quick release we saw a few times in the bubble. This is a guy that, if Bam's setting the high screen and Duncan's floating around, as you pointed out earlier, and Jimmy Butler's somewhere, this is an insane team. That would be an insane team. So again, there's a lot of risk there, but Tyler Hero for James Harden, I'm with you and the executives you pulled. If that's the biggest loss on the cap sheet for the Heat, you put in Kelly Olynyk's money or something to make it work. Come on. You do that 10 times out of 10 for a scoring champion and arguably the greatest offensive player in the league right now. You're immediately a finals contender. But bringing it full circle, Miami might choose to not do it. They might stay away. They might say we have a better plan for next offseason anyway. Hint, hint. We're staying away from this one, guys.
Well, the one thing Miami, so everyone has mocked Boston over and over again for never pulling the trigger on any of these deals, right? And we know the pieces that would have gone out. I wrote over and over again, those decisions are way, way harder than people make them out to be, especially when you are not sure or not even confident or not even remotely confident that the star you're trading for actually wants to play for your team in your city and will stay. And like Boston, it's not been encouraging in that regard with the people going out the door lately. And they obviously didn't think Kawhi wanted to stay, and he didn't. And Paul George wanted to get to LA, and guess where Paul George is now? Miami has the advantage of people tend to like Miami. In fact, if James Harden ends up with the Heat, living on South Beach and also adapting to the Heat's practice regimen, I may move to South Beach just to document it and quit my job to just do that for a whole entire year. But to your point about Duncan Robinson, yeah, I mean, he's an unbelievable fit anywhere he goes. I believe the shooting is real. The numbers you just spouted are preposterous, incredible. And I had a number of those executives say, of course you trade, Hero and all the picks because you'd still have Duncan Robinson on your team. And my thought was, why is Houston not also getting Duncan Robinson? Like he makes the minimum and he's going to be a restricted free agent next year. And I have presumably other bidders who are offering real stuff for James Harden. Like, how am I not getting anything I want other than Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo?
Yeah, that's not, if I'm the Houston side, I'm definitely asking for the cheapest, greatest shooter in the league. And I think it would be preposterous to assume they wouldn't do that in my basketball hypothetical mind. Imagining James Harden and Duncan Robinson together gets me very excited. Maybe I'll have to wait for the Olympics at some point to see that combination on the floor together. The other thing is that Duncan Robinson wasn't even really a finalist, I don't think, for the most improved player of the year. And this guy, I think, started 2 games, played 10 minutes. He started 1 game and then does what he does and doesn't even qualify, in part because his own teammate, Bam Adebayo, it's hard to argue anybody was more improved than Bam Adebayo. Don't get me wrong. In fact, our own ESPN NBA rank had him as the most improved player in the top 100 from last year to this year, going up, I think, like 70 spots, all the way up to number 13. But it speaks again to this Heat culture and its ability to take players like Duncan Robinson, like Kendrick Nunn, like Bam Adebayo, like Tyler Hero. Are they just drafting or finding the right guys? Or are they drafting and finding and then building the right guys? It's an amazing operation right now. And I don't think when we talk about Heat culture, I think that's more of a grittiness. At least that's how I interpret it. In my experience, it needs to account for this incredible player development apparatus. And just look at the names, Zach, that are coming through from relatively nowhere, going back to Hassan Whiteside and becoming highly paid NBA players on the flip side of the Spoelstra time. And Duncan Robinson, bringing it full circle on that, just has 1 year left on this minimum deal, and then he's going to get paid. So good for all these people, but it's a credit to Miami and this Heat culture for building these players up as well.
Here's the bottom line. And again, I'm not sure that any substantive talks have happened with any team at this point, right? So let's just make that clear. I do think Tyler Hero as a single trade piece trumps anything the Nets can offer. Now, whether it trumps the Nets throwing every pick and every swap and doing the same thing they did for the Celtics, except for a better player in his prime, that's TBD. But Tyler Hero, I think, is a more valuable trade piece than Karis LeVert and anything else the Nets can offer. He's not more valuable than Ben Simmons. And so if and when that discussion happens, if that is ever a thing, I think the Heat are at a disadvantage in that sense. But that's a different story. Let's spend a few minutes on pretend this doesn't happen, because it hasn't happened and it probably won't happen. What interests you about the Heat, the current version of the Heat this coming season? Is it who's going to be in their starting five with Crowder gone? Is it do Bam and Hero make a leap? Like what is there a side of the ball? Is there a stat? Is there something that you're kind of looking for to see if they can build on what they did in the bubble?
Yeah, I mean, Bam Adebayo is arguably their best player. In my opinion, he's their best player, and he's still getting so much better. So my eyes are fixed on Bam Adebayo. What are the next few steps in his development? He's still at a very key phase of an already impressive development arc. So what is it? You brought up shooting earlier. The guy has a soft touch. Is he going to come back with an impressive mid-range game, maybe a relatively modest but new catch-and-shoot three threat? Bam Adebayo still has room to grow, and if he's proven anything, he deserves confidence in his growth. So I'm interested in Adebayo. He also has major Jokic potential to some extent to become even better as a playmaker on the offensive end for that team. So he's who I love to watch when I watch the Heat, and I'm interested to see how he grows. He's not alone. I think, the young players like Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, what is he going to bring that he didn't bring last year? Is he going to make it into the starting lineup? And what does that mean for Dragic and the other players? I think those are the key young pieces, Zach, if I had to boil it down, whether it's Nunn or Hero, Robinson, or Bam at the center. How are they going to continue their evolution, and how is that going to manifest in what Miami's able to do on the floor? I expect them to all be better in some ways, and to see that reflected in overall statistical markers, especially offensive efficiency. Remember, this is a team near the middle of the pack in offense last year. I would expect them to be a top 10 offense, I think, coming in. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I think they were last year. I think they were 7th last year, and
even
better in offense.
You're right. They were 7th. That's my bad at 111.9. So I would expect that to climb even higher, though. I think the NBA average is around 110. I would expect all these pieces to coalesce as familiarity goes, and they would be better on offense and probably on defense as well.
I'm interested in how their team changes if indeed Tyler Hero starts and effectively kind of replaces Jay Crowder in the starting lineup. Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson together, 300 playoff minutes minus 18. 118 points allowed per possession. Not good. Very bad defense. Regular season, 565 minutes minus 30. There's some risk on defense pairing Robinson and Hero right off the bat against opposing starters. It's also unclear, like, if you do that, what's the actual lineup? Like, is it Dragic, those two, Jimmy Butler and Bam? So Jimmy's playing the 4 and you're starting smaller right away. I think Harkless, I would bet on Harkless, Mo Harkless, sort of beginning the season at least as the nominal power forward, trying to play the Jay Crowder role where he's rangy enough to guard both positions, not nearly the shooter in terms of volume or, let's say, confidence that Jay Crowder has. In which case, maybe you go without a point guard at all. Maybe you go Butler, Robinson, Hero, Harkless, Bam, and Dragic returns to his 6-man role. I think there's some mystery around that. But those are all sort of like, I think we overdo these decisions, right? Like who finishes games is more important than who starts them. I do think they've gone all in on Bam at center. I would be a little surprised if we saw a return to Myers Leonard as token starter or something like that, given how successful they were in the bubble. But moving Hero to the starting lineup does cause some ripple effects that are interesting, I think, to think about as they navigate it.
It's hard to foresee Tyler not being a starter in this league much longer.
No, he's too good. Sometimes it just happens. A player just comes and takes it. Like Jason Tatum was just like, I'm the best player on the team. It's mine. Like, decision over.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is it's happening in the context of what's bound to be one of the two weirdest seasons in NBA history, the other being the previous one. There's going to be chances for the team to experiment out of necessity in some cases. There's going to be players who don't play in games that might be expected to. I don't think we're going to see the normal cohesion in lineup stats that we're accustomed to seeing this year, just because of the coronavirus. And so I think Spoelstra will use that to his advantage and use it, as you point out, to look at a bunch of these candidate lineups, to look at a bunch of different starting groups and see how they play on offense and on defense. And I think I talked about offense earlier. This team has the possibility. They should be a really good defense too. If they can find the right lineups to play together, you can hide one of these guys, two of them in some cases. You can mix in zone when you need to, as they've done so well. But this team should improve its statistical markers. Zach, that's my big season preview item for the Miami Heat. I expect their offensive efficiency and their defensive efficiency to get a little bit better. They're too good not to.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, I don't think the bubble was a major fluke. I think they did adapt to it better. Jimmy Butler played the best basketball of his life. Like, can he duplicate that again on the biggest stage? Maybe. I don't rule it out. But even just saying that, like, the East is going to be really good. Saying it wasn't a fluke, in my opinion, doesn't mean like I'm picking the Heat to make the finals next year. Like, Milwaukee's still there. Boston, if Kemba gets healthy, is still there. Brooklyn is coming. Philly's better, and on and on. And Toronto's still there. We can name all the teams. It's like the East is still really good. Like, the odds are against the Heat. Both things can be true. It could have been legitimate, and the odds are against them repeating it. And I think both those things are true. You've got to go, I believe, pick out some holiday decorations and things. Mr. Goldsberry, it's always good to see you. Please stay safe. Keep your family safe, and I hope to see you at a game soon, my friend.
Hey, I can't wait to see you at a game. Zach, thank you for having me.
All right, let's bring in to talk about the Boston Celtics, 17-time world champions, had a fairly eventful transaction period with Gordon Hayward bolting to the storied Charlotte Hornets for an enormous amount of money. The Celtics have made the Eastern Conference Finals 3 of the last 4 seasons, which feels like an accomplishment, but it also feels a little bit like a disappointment once the losses in the Eastern Conference Finals start to pile up, even though 2 of them were against LeBron James. To help us talk about the Celtics, the guy on our staff who I think spends the most time, obviously, in Boston, Tim Bontemps. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Zach. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
It's always good to see your smiling face. Always relentlessly positive. You don't let the grind get you down. You're always ready for more. You ready for this? There are games tonight, by the way.
There are games tonight, amazingly. I was thinking about this last night. I was leaving the bubble, I think, 2 months ago today. Or tomorrow, and it both feels like a million years ago and yesterday at the same time, if that makes sense. It's hard to believe that there's games happening this fast, but it also feels like that was a lifetime ago. So I am excited to see the season though, because as you and I both know, the last 3 weeks have been crazy, and I have no idea what any of these teams are going to look like. We haven't seen any of these rookies play. All these guys have changed teams. We don't know who's going to be playing because of COVID. I mean, it's probably the most interesting preseason for me ever, because I don't know what any of these teams are going to look like.
I'll tell you, I'm not optimistic about the quality of play in tonight's preseason slate.
You're not fired up to watch Knicks Pistons, Zach? It's not going to be a good ball game?
Is that a game that's happening tonight?
That is a game that's happening tonight, believe it or not.
I mean, honestly, I'm more fired up for that than I am for 2 teams who went far in the bubble. Like Knicks and Pistons, they should be like raring to go. They should have the full squad. Let's go. It's been like 9 months since they played a game.
You would think so.
I might tune into that, Tim Bontemps. You know how well that's going to go over in my house? Hey, honey, it's Friday night. Season's starting in about 10 days. Let's crack open a bottle of wine and watch RJ Barrett.
RJ Barrett.
Yeah, let's fire that up. All right. Let's talk about this. Oh, but speaking of I also had this very strange sensation where it's like 6 months ago or something, I was like doing these hardcore legal articles about the NBA's attempt to red flag older coaches, among other people, anyone with a medical red flag, to keep them out of the bubble, and how some of the older coaches and their representatives were like prepared to mount a legal battle possibly. And now it's like, we're just like Mike D'Antoni just getting on airplanes and staying in hotels and like that's just what we're going to do. Oh, okay. Anyway, let's talk about the Celtics, Tim, because that's much more pleasant. Obviously, we talked about Hayward. The new additions are Jeff Teague, some young guys that they drafted, and some other young guys who will probably have bigger roles this year, and obviously Tristan Thompson for, I believe, the full mid-level, which is a deal I didn't love.
For 2 years, too.
2 years.
Unlike all the other centers who got a player option, he has 2 years guaranteed.
In some cases, a team option or non-guaranteed in the Raptors case, which we're going to talk about with Eric Koreen shortly. I don't know. What strikes your fancy about the Celtics? What should expectations be? What are you worried about? Take it anywhere you want.
I think the big question for me coming into the season is not a shocking one. It's is Kemba Walker still an elite player? As we saw last year, especially at the beginning of the year and at the beginning of the bubble, when Kemba Walker is really good, the Celtics have a chance to be a really, really good team. When Kemba Walker is not really good or, is just good or is hurt, they take a pretty dramatic step down, I think, in what their ceiling is. So, it's kind of a reductive thing, but they had a bit of flexibility with that last year with Gordon Hayward. If Gordon Hayward went out or Kemba Walker went out, they still had 3 primary ball handlers who could really score and create on the court at all times. And with Gordon Hayward gone, that flexibility that they had and that cushion they had has really disappeared. And now if they're going to be able to make the kind of deep playoff run, like you said, Zach, that they've made, 3 of the last 4 years making the conference finals, this is a team that, well, I think maybe they think their ceiling has dropped a little bit, losing Hayward. I think they still think they have the ability to get deep in the playoffs. But if that's going to happen, they need Kemba Walker to be at an elite level. And I think right now it's fair to say that, at least for me, I don't know if he's going to be capable of getting to that level again physically over the course of a full season.
I do think their ceiling is a little bit lower. And I don't think that's like catastrophic. They could still get as far as they got last year. And I think if Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown continue to make leaps, that's the thing. If Jason Tatum is 10% better this year than he was last year, their whole outlook changes. That's all it takes because that dude was that good last year if there's another mini leap there. But if you zoom out, the Celtics last year were 4th in offense and 4th in defense. If there's one side of the ball I'm looking at, it's offense. 4th in offense feels like I'm almost not even sure how they managed that. If you look at their shot distribution, they're average across the board. Average number of shots at the rim, average number of threes, average mid-rangers, nothing special. They didn't shoot particularly well. They're 18th in effective field goal percentage. Didn't shoot threes particularly well. And you look at that and you're like, how do you get up to number 4? Well, the first thing you look at is free throws, and they were below average getting to the line. You're like, how the hell did this happen? And it's really turnovers. They were a low turnover team, as Kemba Walker's teams have tended to be. Yep. But they were 8th. They weren't like 1st or 2nd. And offensive rebounding, they were 5th. So they won the possession game. You take Hayward off of that team, and we'll talk about their starting lineup in a minute. Their starting lineup with Hayward in it was unbelievably potent offensively. Their starting lineup with Smart in it, which I think is the lineup that they will probably start, was more of a defensive lineup. I think defensively they will sustain. I could see a big drop-off on, not a big drop-off, but like 4th to 10th, something like that. If Walker's not healthy, I think the offense could become maybe not a problem because Tatum is that good, but a huge load on Tatum. And then what does the offense look like when Tatum is on the bench for 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 14 minutes a game? I'm really looking at their offense and is that an area is that the side of the ball where if they take a hit, that's going to be it?
Oh, I agree with you. I mean, look, the reason they were a good offense last year is they had 4 20-point scorers on their team. I mean, Gordon Hayward wasn't quite at 20 points a game, but, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown.
18.
Right. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, Gordon Hayward. If you have 4 guys that are that good on offense, your ceiling is going to be, your floor on offense is low almost no matter who else you have. And they didn't have a lot of depth around them. But now you take Hayward out of the mix completely. You take Kemba Walker out of the mix for probably at least the first month, I think. I mean, he's not even getting reevaluated until early January. And I doubt he's playing full minutes for a while after that. I'm not sure he's going to be playing games for a while after that. So, this is going to be, like you said, this season's going to be on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Can those guys both take another, significant step forward? If they can't, I think the regular season could be a bit of a struggle for the Celtics. Not that they're going to miss the playoffs or anything, but that, they might be more likely to finish 6th than 2nd, say, in that kind of probably 2nd tier in the East after Milwaukee.
What's your guess for their starting 5? Wait, when Kemba's healthy. Let's just obviously probably Jeff Teague starts the beginning of the year, whatever. He's a placeholder. When it's go time, what's your guess for their starting five?
Well, 4 spots are pretty clear. It's going to be Kemba Walker, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum. And then I think the 5th one, you could see Daniel Tice or Tristan Thompson start. I think they could do, Brad Stevens hasn't necessarily played like this. I could see him doing what Nick Nurse has done, or did, I guess, 2 years ago with Jonas Valanciunas and Serge Ibaka before the Marc Gasol trade, where against certain teams you could see Tristan start and certain teams see Tice start. I think that's what I would do.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that.
As you saw in the playoffs when Daniel Tice went up against guys like Joel Embiid and Bam Adebayo, he just, for as great a season as he had, he is not big and physical enough to really handle those guys. He really got trucked by Bam in particular. And Tristan gives them the kind of physical presence that Enes Kanter did last year with some defense. So I could see them doing that. The other thing they could maybe do is to bolster the bench a little bit. You could maybe bring Marcus off the bench and say start Grant Williams at power forward.
That's option number 2. That's option number 2.
I do think it's an option, and I would probably like to do it more than I think Brad Stevens will. I think Brad likes Grant more at the 5 than the 4. I think maybe early in the season, I wouldn't be stunned if the Celtics started Marcus Smart at point guard and Grant Williams at power forward when Kemba Walker is out.
With Kemba out, interesting.
It wouldn't stun me if they did that. I think, to your point, I think it's more likely that Teague starts and they go the 3 wings and then a big, and they kind of mix and match with both Williamses and Tice and Tristan Thompson. But I think that is kind of the one flexibility point is, could Grant Williams maybe get in the starting lineup? Because he is a really heady player for a young guy. He's really smart. He's a much better shooter than he showed after going, I think, 0 for 26 to start his career. He ended up
shot pretty well in some key moments in the playoffs.
Yep, and he played some big moments. Brad Stevens trusted him in the fourth quarter, some big games, played Game 7 against the Raptors in the fourth quarter. So I do think he's going to be a key part of the rotation. It's just whether or not he or Marcus Smart is probably the swing guy in the starting lineup.
I mean, I think the safest bet is Walker, Smart, Tatum, Brown, Tice, just because they've built up a lot of continuity. That was basically their starting lineup the entire playoffs. They played 253 minutes in the playoffs, by far the most of any lineup. They were +4 at mediocre offense, elite defense. In the regular season, they were worse than bad offense, crazy good defense. So again, that's why I zero in on how well is this team going to be able to score. I could see them doing the Grant Williams at the 4 thing here and there. But he's also kind of their only traditional 4 that's going to be in the rotation at all, I think. And so I think that maybe mitigates toward bringing him off the bench for depth. And if there is another area of concern, their wing depth, suddenly wing and guard depth, again, unless one of the rookies hits, and Danny loves Peyton Pritchard. I just keep hearing how much they love Peyton Pritchard.
Well, they drafted him 26th when a lot of people would not have drafted him 26th. So that's all you need to know.
And I think Langford has a shot.
Here's the thing, not to cut you off. He's not going to be ready for 2 months probably. He had wrist surgery. I do think he was surprising that he was a top pick. He was a top recruit, goes to Indiana, struggles with his shot, was banged up all year. That's not the kind of guy you expect to come in and play defense. He was surprisingly good, especially for a rookie on defense last year. And I think he is going to play a good amount of minutes. But to your point about their roster, I mean, last year they were basically 6 guys and then all question marks. And they lost Gordon Hayward, added Tristan Thompson, and are essentially in the same exact position where it's 6 guys and all question marks, even to the point where, I'm not quite sure exactly what happened with the Brad Wanamaker, Jeff Teague situation, but Brad Wanamaker was clearly better than Jeff Teague last year. And, I think that's a downgrade. So, they have a ton of questions to answer, to your point, across the second unit and just in depth in general. Because if they lose Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum now or Marcus Smart for any time, you're all of a sudden getting into playing Aaron Nesmith, their rookie first-round pick, a bunch of minutes. Langford, like I said, he's not even going to be ready till probably February. Carson Edwards, they don't have a lot of depth for guys to go to that you expect to be any good.
Young players generally get better, right? That's what they do. Year 1 to 2, year 2 to 3. So I don't think it's crazy to sort of build in your assumptions Romeo Langford, when he comes back, is ready for a real role. Like, remember Brad Stevens just like tossed him into a couple of random playoff games? Like, whoa, what's going on? Romeo Langford's in the game.
He can really guard, and I think Brad likes him. But again, like if he's out till February, like can you count on him to do anything till March? Like then you're probably then you're already halfway through the season.
And this is, I mean, obviously the elephant in the room. It's even, we got to think of a different way to talk about the virus. It's the elephant. It's bigger than, it's like the Tyrannosaurus Rex in the room. Is like, this is not a great season to have a shallow roster. I mean, like I was talking to someone with the Timberwolves the other day, and everyone's concerned about, I think everyone is like way overblowing these concerns. Like, oh, they have 6 guards and wings who all need to play. Like, how are we going to get minutes for Jarrett Culver and Anthony Edwards? And I'm like, just play 3 of them at a time. Play Edwards at the 4. Who freaking cares? Like, there are no stakes for this team. And this person said to me, like, we actually kind of want to have some extra depth this year because we are anticipating like just a pretty rocky road. The one guy we haven't talked about yet, and one of the reasons I didn't love the full mid-level for Tristan Thompson is I just can't quit Time Lord. I can't. I don't care if he bites on pump fakes. I don't care if he's a little late closing out to Serge Ibaka on too many threes in the playoffs. I just can't quit him. And I just want to roll with I want him to get a consistent role because he's so dynamic athletically and he brings a dimension that no one else on the team has. And it's just going to be a matter of, can he earn the coaching staff's trust in big moments to defend with a clear head and keep his feet steady and all that? And like the only way he's going to get there is if he plays. And so he had moments in the playoffs, particularly against Toronto, where it was like, this dude's already an essential part of the team. And then he had moments where clearly he lost some of the trust of the coaching staff. Like I kind of want to roll with Time Lord, partly because I like the nickname too. I just want to roll with the guy.
For people that don't know, he got the nickname Time Lord when he just slept through his introductory press conference with
frowned
the Celtics
upon. It's frowned upon. A lack of punctuality is generally frowned upon in the NBA. If you're late to stuff, people then tend to get annoyed with you. I get it. It's not fun. It's not funny to the coaches. It's funny to me.
It was not an ideal start for him from anything other than a comedic standpoint, which was an ideal start. But look, when you watch him play, you could see he was a projected top 5 pick going into his draft year, and he fell in the draft to the Celtics at 27 for a variety of reasons. But when you watch him play, you can see why he was a high pick. I mean, he's a long, physical guy. He could jump out of the gym. He's a surprisingly good passer. He can catch the ball and make plays in some pick and roll.
Good passer. No, he's a flat, just good passer.
He's a really good passer. He can catch the ball and make plays on the move. He can sling it to the corner. Like, he can do a lot of stuff, but to your point, he has been injured a lot, and he hasn't been able to stay on the court. And because he has been able to stay on the court, he has then struggled with building up the right habits and doing the right kind of stuff to get Brad Stevens and the coaching staff to trust him to play the kind of minutes that they need him to. So the biggest thing I think for him, if he can make it through this season healthy and not be out for 3 or 4 weeks at a time with various knickknacks over the course of the year, I think he'll have a chance to build up his trust level with the coaching staff because they know the kind of physical attributes this guy has. And you saw, like you said, Brad was not afraid to put him in there in the playoffs and give him some rope. And I think if he could get minutes over the course of the season and get a chance to get comfortable and acclimated to what they're doing, I think he's got a chance to really build a big role for them because, like you said, he's got massive upside if he's able to kind of, reach out and grab it.
Let me ask you this. If he's the Time Lord, when he gets injured, why can't he just turn back time like Hermione Granger and like erase his injury from time and then come back to the present tense and be healthy? I don't understand that. He'd get a max contract if he could do that.
He needs the Doctor Strange control of time stuff. That would fix all his problems.
Another Boston hypothesis. This is just a hypothesis out of the blue. Just hypothesis. Jeff Teague is the most boring player in the NBA. Totally subjective designation. For some reason, when I see Jeff Teague, I'm like, that guy's the most boring player in the NBA. I don't know why.
Argue. I mean, at this point, he was always ground bound, and now he's really ground bound at 32 or whatever. I think that's a safe bet.
You mentioned Time Lord's playmaking. Grant Williams is also a good passer, and that gets at another thing, particularly if Kemba has to miss time. Tatum made a leap as a playmaker last year. He was slinging those passes to the corner. He was making pocket passes. Is he a 5 assist per game guy? Is he like Paul George playmaker, but a little bit better? Can he get to 7? Can Jaylen Brown? I still do not trust Jaylen Brown's playmaking in the half court at all. He's a little scattershot. He can get blinders on and all that.
That's the thing I want to see from both those guys is can they both need to get, I think, a step up better in that for them to take a real step as a team. I think that's their biggest weakness for both of them.
I could see games. I mean, we saw it against Toronto when Toronto went box and one. Boston's offense was kind of like, what the hell are we supposed to do here? Like, we don't have enough juice. And Jaylen, there's a certain kind of awkwardness to his game in the half court sometimes that I hope he kind of ages out of, because if they both those guys need to tick up their playmaking. Look, I still think this team, if Kemba's healthy at the end, right when it matters, I still think this team is really good. Their ceiling is a little lower without Hayward, but if you build in some internal development,
they beat Toronto without Hayward last year.
They beat Toronto without Hayward. And, it was a slog, but they beat him. And they also beat a Toronto team where Siakam was just completely out of sorts and lost in that series. But
right.
I would still put this team behind Milwaukee. I think behind Miami. I'm not quite sure. I'm a Miami believer. And I also think behind the fully actualized version of Brooklyn. I'm high on Brooklyn. Again, fully actualized meaning Kevin Durant is 90% of what Kevin Durant used to be. And Kyrie.
I haven't picked the team I think I might pick to come out of the East.
Is Brooklyn?
No, you haven't said the team I meant. I think they're worse than Philly, too.
Philly, I got to see. I look. Philly is my white whale. Okay, I can't.
You and I got caught in the same trap last year, but I'm feeling myself getting sucked back in. I was talking to Windhorse yesterday. I'm feeling myself getting sucked back in again.
I'm not quite there with you because I'm so scarred. If I were a betting man last year, my house would be. I'd have nothing left. I'd be destitute. I'd be destitute on the streets. Well, okay, that's enough Celtics stuff. I think this is an interesting team. I still think they're really good, but they have many more question marks than they did last year, particularly on offense. And the East is, we just named a bunch of teams. We didn't name Indiana. And well, I mean, we named them a little bit, but like the East is no cakewalk. All right, Mr. Bontemps, it's good to see you. I don't know when I'll see you at a game. I don't really know what the season's going to be like, but always good to talk Eastern Conference basketball with you, my friend.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's wrap this series of Eastern Conference previews with the 2019 NBA champion Toronto Raptors. And as always, to help us dissect all things Tampa Bay Raps from The Athletic, Eric Koreen. How are you?
I'm all right, I suppose. How you doing, Zach?
Good. Yeah, so the Raptors are going to play in Tampa. That's a thing. That's happening.
Yeah, in 2020, it's more like, sure, they'll play in Tampa, and when they play their first game in Tampa, that's when I'll know it's happening. But that is the plan, narrowly beating out the likes of Fort Lauderdale and Nashville for the honor of playing or hosting the longest reigning single-season NBA champions in league history. If they had played in Nashville, I might have made a push to at least spend some time there. That's on sort of one of the few American cities that I really would like to go to that I haven't been to.
One of the few? What is that? Some sort of Canadian superiority complex?
Or
you've been to so many of them?
The NBA. My job has allowed me to go to so many of the great and fine American cities, but I don't feel there are many left for that. Like, I really would like to go to, but Nashville is one of them.
I haven't followed. I have two important Tampa questions. I truthfully haven't followed the like nuts and bolts. I've followed the move and the big stuff, but the little stuff I haven't followed so closely. Number one, how many people are like bringing their families?
So that's a question I've asked, especially when it relates to people that have kids, like spouses. Sure, you could see, but kids, like, you want to get in school and all of that. So I've asked a few of the players that, and they are still looking for like semi-permanent homes. So those moves haven't happened. Fred VanVleet the other day sort of said that he's going to find a home, see how it is, and then make a decision. So it's very much a work in progress, and I haven't heard many people committing to bring their families yet. I'm sure some staff members are, but the players, I don't know, like it doesn't seem worth the trouble for the most part. Although Aaron Baines, the new Raptor center, did make the move with his family, and a few days into being in Tampa, his wife gave birth to their third kid.
I saw that. I saw Mr. Baines brought his family. Yeah, and also like if you have kids in school in Toronto, which is like, Toronto has been more functional and more responsive to the pandemic. Like people don't fight about wearing masks and stuff. It seems like
generally not. There's not there's some people. I'm not going to say we've been fine. Our numbers aren't great, especially in Toronto.
It's been going badly. But compared
there's
to
less of a culture war about it. I think that is fair to say. Yes.
Boy, do I not? Yeah. Anyway, let's pivot
let's
fast.
Not talk about the culture war.
Let's pivot. Let's pivot fast. And another important question: have they designed any kind of jersey? Tampa jersey? Is there anything like that in the works? So these are the questions that matter.
Yeah, no, they do have a neat training camp logo. Training camp, I guess, is over and it's on to the preseason, but there was like a raptor taking a bite out of a palm tree, which you could go looking for as a fan of logos.
So the Raptors are aggressively invading Florida and harming the natural landscape, is what that logo is indicating to me.
Well, I think raptors are omnivores? Are those the ones that eat both meat and vegetation? So I think like they do eat plants. So what do you think is going to happen here? Okay. I think they're just finding sustenance where they can.
We need a jersey. They need to design a jersey. I mean, you have to commemorate something like this for posterity. You have to. Okay, well, let's talk about
Lost Raptors. Yes, let's go.
Let's talk about the team. Lost a 7-game bloodbath to the Celtics in the conference semifinals. After going down 2-0 and coming within an OG Anunoby corner three at the buzzer of going down 3-0 and basically packing their bags. Rallied to win 3 of the next 4, sent it to 7, hard-fought game 7. Managed that with Pascal Siakam shooting, I believe, 4 of 32 from 3 in the series and 38% overall, and just sort of looking like he wasn't quite all there in terms of basketball in the bubble. Off-season, the big news obviously was the loss of both of Toronto centers, Marc Gasol to the Lakers and Serge Ibaka to the Clippers, bolting Toronto for sunny Los Angeles. Aaron Baines is one replacement, Alex Len is another. Chris Boucher was re-signed on a 1+1, I guess, however you want to phrase that. Kyle Lowry, not quietly for Toronto fans, maybe quietly for casual NBA fans, on an expiring contract yet again, kind of hovering over the season. What are your expectations? What are reasonable starting expectations for the Raps?
I think most people will slide the Raptors into sort of the bottom half of that top 6 in the East, which we can all recite, and then they'll probably just do what they do and overachieve based on those expectations. Like every year, I sort of want to say, this is the year they sort of really feel the loss of whoever's leaving, but this is a team, an organization that has gone over on their over-under, I think every year since Masai Ujiri's got there, which is the same as the, I think, 7-year and counting playoff streak. Like personally, when I look at the East, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking at 4th, 5th, 6th, a lot of, just having Lowry and Van Vliet guiding the ship means you're going to be more stable and more ready to go than perhaps the likes of Brooklyn, who are figuring it out, and Philadelphia, who's perpetually figuring it out. And I assume Milwaukee will be a regular season powerhouse again, even if not to the same extent. But, as a longer season plays out, this team doesn't have the same top-end talent that a lot of that I'd say the other 5 teams, frankly, do have. You can make a case for that they have the similar top end talent to Miami, but certainly the other four have, higher ceilings, I think. So I think this is a team with a pretty high floor, but a lower ceiling. And I would personally, I haven't done it yet, I'd probably be picking them in the 4 or 5 range right now.
Yeah, they don't have the best player in a playoff series against Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, Philadelphia, or Brooklyn. And I actually, I'm not sure who their best player is. I think Kyle is probably still the best player on the team. As much as I love Pascal.
Year, that's what I would say. I know Pascal made second team NBA. I think a lot of people would have changed their picks after the playoffs, but he had a very good season. That's not to take it away from him. But I think best or whatever, I think Kyle last year was the most important player. And until proven otherwise, he still is.
Last year, Toronto 13th in offense, 2nd in defense. Much was made of their half-court offense potentially being a problem in the playoffs. They feasted in transition. They were the most beautiful transition team to watch all season, and that problem indeed came to roost against the Celtics. In the playoffs, their offense dropped a couple of points per possession. Their defense held firm. They were the best defense in the playoffs overall. Against the Celtics, they averaged a number in the half court that was so low, it looks like it shouldn't be possible for a team as good as Toronto. And so those concerns were well-founded. Ibaka and Gasol, it's not easy to dismiss them because I think they were both quite good for Toronto. Ibaka, I would have put Ibaka on my 6th man of the year ballot had he been eligible. He was not eligible. He was outstanding last year. Gasol fell off in the playoffs, but did what they asked. And I think both of those guys, and this is the reason I think more than anything else that Masai Ujiri made that trade from Marc Gasol. Both of those guys, this was an especially important leap for Serge, became big men who, if you gave them the ball 18 feet from the rim in the middle of a possession with a bunch of pieces moving around all over the floor, they would settle it and make the right play. And that is really, really important when you get into the playoffs. And Baines is a smart player and an okay passer. He kind of transitioned into a more pick and pop guy with Phoenix. I'm not sure he has quite that same ability. He can knock down a mid-ranger, but he's not the same level of, he doesn't have a Surge's pump and drive game. He's not Gasol's level as a passer. So the offense still concerns me, and the depth concerns me. They were a 7-man team by the end of the playoffs. They lost 2 of those guys, and I don't know that they signed any. They replaced 1 with Baines. I'm not sure that I think the 7th man is an interesting discussion. So offense and depth, pick one of those and go.
The offense, both, you're right, are concerns. I think they can figure things out in terms of regular season depth, but that's not what we're talking about totally. The offense, I'm not sure how much they have changed. Half court, dynamic half court play is what they were clearly missing in the series against Boston. And part of that is, their best scorer was basically, and he's talked about how hard the bubble was from both a physical and a mental perspective, Pascal Siakam, and I don't want to diminish that because we can't.
We can't diminish that. And also, we sort of glossed over it with Tampa Bay. This is a team that was in the bubble for a long time and is now the only team in the NBA that is going to be away from their families, away from their home arena. This is a veteran, strong, tough team. They love to play. They love basketball. Nick Nurse just rolls with it, brings his acoustic guitar and his speakers. But it would not surprise me if they reach a point where if they can't go back to Toronto and the league can't play there, it's that's a real thing. That's a real toll.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much it matters to the guys who've never lived in Toronto before, who don't have any sort of regular housing setup, but it's going to be different for them for sure. They don't they're making a Marriott ballroom into a practice facility. So it's strange. But, what I was saying about Siakam is he said he didn't have fun. When he watched the games, it looked like he didn't have fun in the bubble. And to me, the cynical part of me always wonders, well, was he not having fun because he was playing poorly, or was he playing poorly because he was not having fun? So I don't know, but at a time that was so tough mentally for so many people, and we heard other players talk about it, I don't want to just dismiss it out of hand. So I think it's reasonable to expect Pascal Siakam to be better in next year's playoffs than this year's playoffs, because he was really bad in this year's playoffs, and that should be a quote-unquote learning experience. But in terms of adding to that, from a talent perspective, they didn't do a whole lot of that. Malachi Flynn was their first-round pick, 29th. He's a 3-year but a redshirt player, so he might be able to contribute. He's one of the better pick-and-roll guards in the draft, but again, he's a rookie. Terrence Davis showed some pop last year. He's in the middle of court proceedings. He will have a court date on Friday related to 7 charges, including 2 assault charges. We don't know if he's going to be available to the team or what the situation will be come opening night. And, without getting into the details, who knows if he'll be around with the Raptors once the season starts. And then you look at the rest of the roster and like who they brought in. DeAndre Bembry's not there for his offense. Alex Len isn't creating stuff on his own. He's not even like a Jonas type who you're going to throw the ball into and create some post offense. So you need Siakam and Van Vliet and Norm, guys who were very good for them for most of last year, to be more consistent in the playoffs. And the one thing I didn't mention is they brought in Nick Nurse's old buddy from Britain, Chris Finch. Which is very exciting for me to make Finchy references for a whole year. And he's obviously seen as one of the better offensive minds in the league. And I think, it's not unreasonable to think he'll help identify some of the weaknesses and get maybe Pascal Siakam the ball in better positions and get a bit more creative with set pieces, because Nick Nurse liked to run a very freewheeling offense, a sort of improvisational offense. And I think against the Celtics, they were a bit better in called plays, but they just weren't that unpredictable with called plays. They were more predictable with called plays. So I think that's sort of where you're looking to see them grow.
And you can do stuff with Siakam in the high post. He's a good passer, and I think that's a part of his game that hasn't quite been unlocked yet, with having cutters rolling around him.
And that's something that Chris Finch, and the one time we did talk to him, mentioned. Like, he's so good at drawing attention that they need to turn him into a more, not a willing passer. I think he's plenty willing, but they need to show him the avenues and get him used to that.
Yeah, and I think Pascal is 27 now, so there's probably still another leap. Not leap, but there's. I don't think it's like he's maxed out. I think he can still become a better all around player. Fred VanVleet is what, 28? 26. Wow. Okay, so he's got a place to grow. And OG Anunoby, I think, was just after kind of a lost season in the championship year, was beginning to scratch the surface of what he could be as a 3-and-D guy, but with some pop off the dribble and off the catch.
In the bubble, he did some stuff that we'd just never seen him before. Yep. Now it was like one possession at a time, very much like they weren't running it through him. He's still like, when we're talking about an extension for OG Anunoby, his career usage rate is something like 13 or 14%. And there's just like almost no track record for giving guys extensions before they hit restricted free agency at that sort of role in terms of the offense. And I mean, I don't know if you want to have a whole conversation about his extension. I'm skeptical it happens, but he was intriguing enough that it wouldn't be a surprise to see that usage go up from 14 to maybe 18 this year. Like that.
I still think he's going to be able to, and this is important in the playoffs. Like, people dismiss it as irrelevant in the modern game. I still think OG is going to be able to post up smaller guys when teams tried to hide those guys on him in the playoffs. And like, that's like, we just talked about scrounging for buckets in the half court against the best teams. Like, sometimes you have to do that. And I think he's going to be able to do that.
Yeah. His footwork really took a leap in the bubble. I thought he was even like put in I think the weakest part of his game pretty clearly at the beginning of his career was fluidity, both with the ball in transition and just in the half court. Like, he would lose his footing a lot of times. And I think he got, it's still like the part of me that's watched him play his first 100 games or whatever is like, oh my God, OG's going to fall now. But he looked much better. And it'll be interesting to see what that looks like with more reps and probably in, not just the best case scenarios. You're actually looking to force that and get to that sometimes. So he's definitely a big factor for them. And if he takes a leap, like he's the most natural guy on the roster to expect a quote unquote leap from.
Yeah, I'm assuming their starting five will be Lowry, Van Vliet, Anunoby, Siakam, Baines, and that will be
Nick Nurse basically confirmed that yesterday.
That will be a rock solid lineup. After that, Powell is obviously your sixth man, and maybe walks into the season as one of the favorites for sixth man of the year, assuming he retains that role and no one gets hurt and he has to start and all that. And then you named all the guys after that, other than really Chris Boucher and Matt Thomas, who was kind of their eighth guy by the end of that Celtics series, just because he's such a good shooter. We'll see how much he plays in real games again this year, but. Boucher, I would guess, will be Baines' backup, maybe play with him now and then. Davis is a rotation guy, but as you said, there are much more important issues to sort out, and we'll see how those issues resolve themselves. 7 through 10, is Pat McCall going to get another shot at it? That generally hasn't gone well. Stanley Johnson's hanging out. The depth is going to be an issue, and one way around it, I think they'll probably play Siakam at center a little bit more in the regular season than they did a year ago, just because that's how their roster is built, I guess, right?
Yeah, you'll see, against the Celtics, you saw a lot of OG Pascal front line. I think you'll see that a bit more. I know you're all in for this conversation. I'm very excited for 18 minutes a night of Chris Boucher. I want to see if those per minute numbers translate in a way that actually helps the team, I guess.
He's an incredible story, and I think he can do some things on the floor. Did he lead the league in blocked three-pointers? He led the league in blocked three-pointers per possession. He's 10 feet away from you, and then he is swatting your shot into the freaking crowd.
Yeah, and I think that's why there might actually be a role, not every game, but a lot of games for both him and Len, because him running out and that's part of the reason why they play so much zone and having Pascal run around out there, because he is a scary presence for a three-point shooter. Those arms coming at you, that's very much part of why the Raptors play how they play. And if you could have Boucher also in a position to be running at perimeter shooters, they like that. He is just when they're, for a team that wants to run as much as they want to run, he is a fascinating option. Nick Nurse loves Patrick McCaw. You touched on him. This is the sort of not hot topic, but it makes Raptors Twitter very angry. Nick Nurse's
Raptors Twitter. What a world that is to live in. Raptors Twitter let me ask you this. According to Raptors Twitter, now that they've won a championship, is the whole league still aligned against the Raptors, or is that now changed? Is Adam Silver the cigarette smoking man, and it's all a conspiracy against the Raptors, or have they gotten over that?
Why aren't the Raptors playing on Christmas Day this year?
So it's back. We're back.
I haven't heard it as much this year. There are still strains of disrespect. There was, I think, on a call, a Tampa-based reporter who asked Norman Powell on Thursday about, whether he thinks the Raptors are being overlooked and slept on. And
Great question. Just tee him up.
Yeah, and he was just like, it's the same thing every year. But you can even tell his heart wasn't in it to the same.
No, but it's one thing to be slept on. Yeah. It's another thing to be the victim of a mass global conspiracy that starts at the top. It starts with Trump. Maybe Obama. Really, when we're being serious.
Yeah. I don't know how to truthfully answer that question. I think it's died down, certainly. And when you look at it hasn't gone away. And there are still noting of specific referees when they are calling Raptors playoff games, even if the numbers do not bear out an individual gripe with the Raptors at all. Even if the Raptors record with Tony Brothers calling games is sterling, Tony Brothers is still obviously out to get them at the behest of, Tatum, Silver. Who knows?
The UN.
Yeah.
Don't let them off the hook.
But it's pretty hard to erase a championship. Or maybe that's how they wanted to get us off the scent, is allowing one meaningless championship to break up Golden State, because that wasn't good for the league. The league decided there were too many people complaining. We're on to him.
Let's go back to Boucher. He was one of my Luke Walton All-Stars last year, and I loved interviewing Nick Nurse about him because Nick likes him. And one of the things that Nick likes about him, which is such a rare thing for a coach to actually like about a player, is when he comes in the game, he just shoots right away. Like he doesn't need to warm up. He's just give me the ball. And like Nick actually likes that. He's like, I like the confidence. And we talked about it last year. I think he shot like 31% from three or 29% or something like that. His stroke looks better than that, and it wouldn't surprise me if he could get up to league average. And to your other point, we spent a lot of time talking about the offense. I think the defense is legit. I expect them to be a great defensive team again. They give up a lot of threes, and there was this question of, well, are they getting lucky? They gave up the most corner threes in the history of the league. And is it fluky? Are they lucky? And I don't think it is. I think there's a scheme, there's a thought process behind it, and part of it is that we got these long-armed, fast dudes who are going to be flying at you, and we'd like a lot of the corner threes we give up are taken by your fifth option, and we're cool with that. And I think it's legitimate. I expect them to be a top 5 defense again.
Yeah, I was going to say top 7, just like factoring in more regression, but yeah, I'd be surprised if they're not very good. Gasol is a huge loss. I've heard you talk about sort of canvassing people around the league and saying he's their most important defender. I'm not sure that's true, just because of how often he was on the floor and how injured he was last year. But I think when he was on the floor, it's fair to have said that. And he's just one of the smartest defenders of all time, obviously. So they'll miss him. I'm not sure how much they'll miss Serge. I don't think by the end of his career he was a huge plus on defense. He's good around the rim, but his work on the perimeter certainly is not what it used to be. And so other than as a shot blocking presence right at the rim, I don't think they'll miss him a ton. And they're rock solid across. Like, Norm is their worst defender in those top 6 men, and he's average, right? Like, So when you have Kyle and Fred, who are elite for their positions, when you have OG, who, there's so many good wing defenders in this league, but you can easily make an all-defensive team case for him last year, and you should be able to again. And when you have Pascal Siakam just being like one of the best defenders within a zone, I think his play-to-play attentiveness can still grow, and you factor in how much of the offensive load is on him there, but he just wrecks stuff in zone defenses, and when he's truly dialed in there, he might be their most effective defender. So you just have that many good defenders on the floor, plus McCaw's a good defender, Boucher's a good defender, they brought in Bembry, he's certainly a flexible defender. They're going to be a really good defense, and the questions that I have are more or less the same questions that I had last year.
And I think their zones are, they're more versatile in their zones than Miami, and I think their zones should sustain as pretty effective. And I guess if there is a case that they fall out of the top 5, like I said, or top 7, it's just injuries and depth and pandemic. You just don't know, like if 2 of their starters get hurt or whatever, God forbid, catch the virus or something, you just don't know what's going to happen with their defense. But I think you've got them slid into the right spot in the Eastern Conference hierarchy, somewhere 3 to 6. They clearly have ambitions, short-term, medium-term, long-term, to be better than that. And so that just sort of, raises the interesting question of where do they go next if that's indeed where they finish. But that's a question for another day. Any concluding Raptors thoughts?
I did an exercise where I was trying to figure out what a Kyle Lowry trade might look like. And I know we don't want to have a whole long conversation about this, but it's kind of difficult to make one. That's not to say teams wouldn't line up at the deadline if he was available, but it's a lot of money. And since the Raptors don't know what position they're going to be in 2021, I think his bird rights are also meaningful to the Raptors. So I think even though they would have to clear those or renounce those rights in order to sign somebody with the flexibility they may have. So I don't think a trade is very likely. They'd have to be bowled over, I believe, unless the year goes kaput in a way that right now is tough to foresee.
He's also a franchise icon, and we will know more about the 2021 offseason one way or another in 10 days, which is the deadline for Giannis to sign or not sign his Supermax. Mr. Kareem, it's always great to talk Toronto Raptors. Hopefully I'll see you at a game in the T-Dot in the medium future.
Next December, we do this in Toronto, huh?
That's right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.